Hey everybody, it's Chelsea here. We are live with this week's edition of Girl Talk, Giving Yourself Permission. I am going to be joined very shortly by my dear friend, Leah Kozatsky. I'm just waiting for her to come on so that I can invite her in. And if you're catching this today, we are talking about boundaries and all of the important ways that, and I guess kind of sometimes unseen or hidden ways that boundaries affect our lives. They have a huge impact. Oh, here's Leah now. I'm just going to invite her in if I can. Let's see here. Leah, are you able to ask to join? Oh, here we go. I think I've got you. Sorry, everybody. There we go. Here's Leah. How are you? We
It's
did it.
working.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so do you want to try share it with your, hi Nicole, how are you? Are you able to try share it so that it goes on your page as well? I'm not sure if it happens automatically.
I,
Sorry, Nicole, just bear with us while we do some technical things. We're just making sure that everything gets shared. Your camera flipped.
yeah, actually, I can't on my phone. I don't know why it does that, but usually I can do it on my laptop. So
Okay,
I'll share it after.
yeah, sounds good. All right. Hey, Nicole, thanks for being here with us. So hopefully there are more people that are able to join us live. If not, if you're catching the replay, hello. Hi, Paula. How are you? So Leah and I are here as we are every week to chat with all of you beautiful people. We have our weekly series on Thursdays that we call Giving Yourself Permission, and where each week we explore a different and very vital way that we give ourselves permission to do one thing or another in our lives. And today we're talking about the very important topic of boundaries. And
Yes.
yeah, Leah and I were chatting about that, and we just, we're talking about our different perspectives. I'd be interested to hear what boundaries make our viewers think about, because there's lots of different ways that it can affect us, and in different ways that we can actually put boundaries up. But I think if we're not aware of them, that was one of the things that I think, I wanted to kind of touch on first before we start talking about how boundaries are important and different sort of themes where boundaries are important is what it's like to be a person with no boundaries. Hey, Leah, right? We talked about that, when we were younger. And just, it's sort of this misguided thing, right? Like when you're young and you're maybe kind of a little idealistic and you think about, well, you don't really think about it back then, but, you know.
Yeah, you don't really think about it back then. Like, I think that it's more about people pleasing and making sure that, like, everything is peaceful and that everyone's happy. Um, Especially in the way that, like in the generation that we were brought up in, is like you don't really have to feel your feelings. It's
Mm-hmm.
really important to like keep a consistent positive flow of feelings. And if you rock the boat, then, something bad might happen. So
Mm-hmm.
don't do that. But I like to see boundaries as like using it as the B word. It's the B word for me.
The B word, that's good.
Yes. Yes.
Nicole brings up a really good point about bringing or erecting boundaries and feeling like she'll be seen as selfish. And you know
Mm.
what? I think that that's one of the things, that's a really good point that you bring up, because if we have been living in a way where we don't have boundaries and we suddenly shift and we suddenly impose these very vital and important boundaries, it's going to rock the boat. There's going to be people that we're used to taking or receiving from you in a certain way, and then all of a sudden they've been cut off, even
Yeah.
though it should be there for your own health and your own sanity. You are going to sometimes, experience a little bit of, waves or turbulence as a result of imposing boundaries, but you really have to weigh out the importance of your, like I said, your own sanity and your own well-being. And so yes, Nicole, you're right, and it can be a bit of a work in progress as we're learning through all of this. I just, as we were talking about, like, just to kind of touch on the subject a little bit more, thinking back of, to what I was like before I had boundaries at all, how exhausted I ended up being as a result of it. I don't know if you've shared the same experience, Leah, but I went through two major bouts of burnout, adrenal fatigue, exhaustion. Those are all the same words for basically that same thing, where you're just giving, over giving. You don't know when or where to shut it off, and really, we end up draining ourselves completely of our energy as a result. So this is such a vital, important topic. And so we're going to chat. I think that if Leah, if you can kind of share with us a little bit about what you think of when you hear the word boundaries and kind of how that plays into your own life, and really how you have learned how to strengthen your own boundaries through this.
Hmm. Well, before we jumped on this call, we were talking about the different types of boundaries that there are. So, there's like physical boundaries. So, part of
Mm-hmm.
your bubble, right? And then there's time boundaries, so with whom and what you spend your time doing. There's career boundaries, there's family boundaries, there's, relationship boundaries. There's all kinds of different types of boundaries. But when you get really, really clear on what it is that you want, um, it kind of, like you said, it'll rock the boat. Like Nicole was saying, sometimes I think it's, a challenging thing to do. Yes, it does rock the boat because people are used to, or you are also used to the way that you are living out your dynamic. So when you're carrying like, a charge of pleasing all around, it's really hard to just like from one day to the next change that. And also for the people that have been around you to keep up with the, oh my gosh, she's changing. Like, what's going on? Like, how come is she being selfish now? Kind of thing. Like, or am I feeling selfish because I'm setting these boundaries? So I love this topic because, you know, like you, Chelsea, like I didn't have any boundaries. It was really all about what can I do for you? What will make you happy? Um, how can I keep the peace? And now, I think it takes practice. So first things first,
Really.
yeah, like know that you are not selfish in setting boundaries. If you see people that you admire, um, like I'm not talking about like gurus, but just like role models that you admire, they have boundaries. They've set their boundaries. It's very clear. In setting boundaries, you're educating the people around you how to react with you, how to be with you. And there's nothing selfish in that at all. So it might seem selfish at the beginning because you're starting out. So it's really, all about baby steps. And I remember thinking when I first started setting boundaries for like just even time, right? Who I was spending time with, what I was actually doing, setting up my schedule as a business owner, what that looked like. I had all of my friends just like come out from nowhere when I first started my business. And they're like, hey, do you want to go for coffee? And I spent like months just going for coffee and lunches and
Oh
hanging
yeah,
out, right?
absolutely. I can totally relate to that. Yeah, because you set your own schedule, and then we're just like
Yeah.
it's time
And they're
to
like, well, how come you're not hanging out with me when you're not busy? Right?
go.
Like you're not busy, you're working from home. So then I had to learn, like, it's in the learning and the doing that you start, applying baby steps in boundary setting. And so I thought, what, something's not working here. I'm just going to start saying no to people. No, I can't go for coffee. No, I can't hang out for 3, 4 hours talking about your problems. I can't do that anymore. And that certainly upset many people. And you know what? It's okay because I can't have with the business, like if I had a job, I wouldn't go and spend, 3, 4 hours talking over coffee with somebody, talking about their problems. That would just be really, really draining. So why should I be doing that, in a business?
Mhm.
And so I just did it, one step at a time. And it felt very uncomfortable, very, very uncomfortable. And the more I would do it, the more I'd be like, okay, that felt uncomfortable, but it felt good to me. So, and I trained the people around me to understand how to like interact with me and how I wanted to interact with them too, right?
Mhm.
So not only was I setting boundaries for time for myself, for others, but I was doing it like in a way that was honoring myself. And knowing
Mhm.
that, it came from like a deeper place and it was more like okay, it's not a selfish, superficial kind of place, but I need to do this so I can move forward and then I can help others around me. And that's just how I saw it. So the more I would do it, it would just be, incremental. And then all of a sudden now, if somebody wants to hang out with me, or somebody like needs my time or whatever it is, like I'm really intentional. I'm like, what are we going to be doing and talking about in that moment?
Mhm.
Is it urgent? I have like a whole slew of questions now. And then I determine, like, is it worth that time, especially when I'm doing business, or if I'm spending time with my kids. So again, it's just trying, practicing, seeing how you feel, but let it come from like a good place where you're totally honoring yourself, knowing that, setting boundaries. I think there should be, Chelsea, another word for it, because I feel like setting boundaries means setting up walls around you, and that is not what I'm doing.
That's a really important distinction, and I wanted to kind of talk about that too because I actually shared a quote about this on
Hmm.
my Facebook account not too long ago, and it's about the distinction between walls and boundaries because they're not the same thing. And you know what? That's a good point.
Hmm.
Maybe boundaries isn't. I don't even know if there is a word that I can think of. We'll see if we can come up with it. Maybe someone else can share. By the way, I just wanted to say hello to Aileen and Sunday who hopped on as well. Um, so yes, because walls are different, and walls are what keep us separate from people. They
Hmm.
keep us from being vulnerable with other people. They keep us kind of isolated and alone, and that's a very different thing. Boundaries are kind of like I don't know if you remember learning about in school, like the permeable membrane, right? It's like that
Hmm.
thing that allows. It's like a filter, so you're allowing certain things through. And when I chat a little bit more about boundaries from my perspective, when we talk about, relationships with certain people in our lives where we kind of maybe struggle a little bit or they, maybe bring out a side of us that we don't really want anymore in our lives, then we're going to filter out certain things like that, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
basically, if we think about boundaries as a way where if we have them intact properly, we are as healthy as possible. We are standing in our own power. We are, I in my work I use the image of a queen. We're regal. We're powerful. We're strong, and we are graceful in what we're doing. Right? Like we're just allowing, we know that we have all of these people that we care about in our lives, but we also have the awareness that, we have work to do. We have a vision to uphold. We've got children to look after. There's certain things, there's certain priorities that we have. Um,
Yeah.
so we're not necessarily shutting people out of our lives. We're not ignoring them. But it's sort of setting guidelines. Yeah, Nicole, you mentioned that personal guidelines. It's like just sort of standing tall and standing firm in what we believe in and what we'll allow into our lives because there especially if we're living without boundaries we can start to set this precedent for being treated in a way or giving in a way that doesn't feel good to us. So having healthy boundaries should feel delicious. Like I know you were talking about in the
Hmm.
beginning, Leah, where it was a little bit uncomfortable to impose them, but once you get really strong at it, when you feel like you're imposing a healthy boundary, it should feel really good. Like you should. I get like
Yeah,
I
it
feel
does.
proud of myself when I impose a healthy boundary because I know that nobody got hurt. Somebody might have gotten a little bit offended, but nothing really bad happened, right? And I know that by doing that, I've preserved a little bit of my energy and my sanity for the things that I'm here for, the things that I stand for, and
Hmm.
for the roles that I play, especially as a mother, as a woman with her own business, and as someone who really really value being healthy and strong. And I think it's important for that.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, healthy boundary setting. I love
absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
Tell us about time. Time,
Time.
sorry, no, not time boundaries, relationship boundaries.
Well, yeah. So, okay, and
Or
of
what
course,
that looks
time.
like
I think
too,
it's
like for
time.
you.
We've covered it, but I think I'm just trying to think if there's anything I have to say about it. Like, I think with time for me, like Leah covered, it's just one of those things that, like, the more that you get really clear on your ideal day, your ideal
Mhm.
life, then you get clear on how much time you want to be spending, doing this or that, and then it helps you really get clear on how you want to impose these boundaries. When we were chatting about this before, and I was kind of thinking about what boundaries make me think of, or kind of how boundaries have really played an important role in my life. I think about relationships, because I think about all of the people in my life that I interact with, I spend time with. Hey Rose, how are you? And especially I think about my family. I love my family. I think all of us, we have interesting relationships with our family of origin, and often boundaries can play a big role with this, because we grew up when we were children with our parents and with our siblings. They related to us in a certain way. But then when you get to a point where you've decided who you are and how you're showing up in the world, sometimes that doesn't jive as well, or it can get really uncomfortable with your family. You often hear about people, especially if you move away from home and you don't live in the same city as your family. It's sort of like this thing where you go home for the holidays and you end up sort of reverting back to your old ways, because you're relating, you're maybe back in your bedroom where you grew up, and you feel like a
Yeah.
child again, right? So anyways, when it comes to your family, I think it's important to get really, really clear on, who you are and how you stand, and where your family sometimes can potentially not jive with that properly, and get really clear on how you're going to relate to them, and where you're going to impose these boundaries. Sometimes, with our families, they can expect us to always be there for them in a certain way. They can expect to potentially want to always chat about another person in another way. There's certain
Mm.
things that we may have, in our own personal growth, evolved beyond what we learned in our family. And, I think that's a big one, is that, where you're spending all of this time chatting or gossiping about other people, right? And if that's something that doesn't really fit in number one, you don't have the time for it, because of course I think that can take a lot of precious time when we're sitting there discussing other people's issues or problems. And it can be hard to just kind of say, what, this to impose that boundary of, I don't have time for this, I don't have any interest in chatting about so and so, talking, let's talk about the important things, right? So this is something that I think it's just kind of, and not to say that I come from a family of gossips or anything like that, but I'm gonna have people mad at me after this. No, I'm just kidding. It's basically just one of those examples of how we can kind of revert back. I think that as we're all getting really, really clear on who we are and focusing on our own personal growth, it's just making sure that we can uphold that way of being when we're in different relationships. Another way that this comes up is, in relationships with a spouse or a partner, just getting
Mhm.
really, really clear on still having our own inner circle of what we need, right? I mean, I think that within relationships there can be this, and this gets passed down through families like crazy, this codependency, right, that can happen, where it's like there's no. Oh, Preston wants to join us. Do you want Preston in? I think you might have some things to say
I
about.
think
What do you think, Leah? It's up to you. It's your call.
he's not a girl. We're gonna set
Oh.
boundaries right now.
High five, sister. Sorry, Preston. I think
Preston,
he has
so
some.
Preston, if you wanna make a comment, you can comment below.
Can you
I
see his
think it might have
comment?
been a mistake. I think it might have been a mistake that he like wants to join the live.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Can you see his comments? Because he did.
No,
He just said, "Yay, Chelsea." I think about, I don't know, talking about this, but
I can't.
basically,
Yeah, I can't see any of the comments. Sorry, Chelsea.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll tell you if there's any more. valuable comments coming through from Preston, but I don't know, maybe he's not here anymore. So,
Even if we
anyways,
love them, it's okay.
okay.
We're
Thanks, Preston.
setting boundaries. We're on a boundary, like a boundaries show. We might as well set boundaries.
I love it. I love that he gave us the opportunity to do
I
that.
know.
How
It's so
beautiful.
awesome.
Okay, but so just kind of around that same topic, this can be a huge issue in within couples. And I think it's because we all can be so different in, how much time we need alone and how much time we need with
Yeah.
our loved ones, right? We can really vary in this. And this is where I think what goes hand in hand with boundaries is really good communication, right? Because I know I've been in relationships where I want to spend more time with the man that I happen to be with, and he needs his own time, but he said it in a really rude way, like in a really kind of like push me away kind of way, right? Where I now thinking back, he probably just needed some alone time. And if
Yeah.
he had known a healthy way to express that boundary, I would have respected that. I would have understood it because I value my alone time as well. And I know that that's something that we all need for ourselves, right? So
Yeah.
I think when it comes to relationships, those are sort of the two main examples that I can think of. What about you? Does it bring up anything different for you?
No, nothing different, but I want to piggyback on what you were talking about gossiping. Okay,
Okay.
because like, when we're starting to set boundaries, I think that a lot of times we kind of vet the time or we tally how much time we spend doing certain activities, and one of them might be gossiping. And I think it's really important to just, get really clear on what your values are. Maybe gossiping isn't one of your values, but it's something that you grew up in. And I'm, actually speaking from something that happened in my career, where there was a time where I thought, you know what, I don't. This is not part of my values anymore. Talking like negatively about people, or not even negatively, just talking about people because I couldn't deal with like my own issues.
Mm-hmm.
So why not talk about other people? It's way more fun, and do it in a group, right? So
Yeah.
it's very, very entertaining. So when I got really clear on what my personal values were, like deep core values on who it was to be for me to stand in my power and to show up, gossiping was not part of it. And I remember thinking, like, okay, if that's what I want in my life, but I am still gossiping, how can I get out of that kind of group? Because there's like a camaraderie in gossiping,
Oh
right? So
yeah.
where everybody comes together, talks about it for days and goes back and oh my gosh, and this and that. So I would slowly not tell the people, my gossiping group. I wouldn't be like, hey, I want to stop this right now. I don't like you people anymore. Like, I don't want to hang out with you. It was more like when they would start gossiping, I would just say like, you know what, I got to go do something else right now. And it was like a really subtle way of just saying, I'm not going to be part of this.
Mhm.
And they started like not necessarily like including me in their circle anymore, which
Yeah.
was, created a grieving process because as we're evolving, there is a grieving process to go through as we're setting boundaries. We're becoming different, like a different version of ourselves, like up
Mhm.
leveling the version of ourselves. So I thought, okay, well, it's okay. This is what I've chosen. These are my values. Will I go back to that? No, I don't want to go back to that. Will I find new friends to do like talk about cool things with? Of course I will, right? Like there are billions of people in the world. So why can't I find my tribe, right?
Mhm.
So when it comes to relationships, yes, absolutely. Like that's what came up for me as you were talking about it. But there's just so, I mean, we could have a whole segment. I think we could have like multiple shows on this topic of setting boundaries and the
Oh yeah.
importance of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We're
and
just
in
scratching the
on
surface. It's
many different
endless.
levels, right?
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
so true.
yeah.
Hi,
So
Mallory.
that's what comes up. What?
What's that? Oh, I was just saying hi to Mallory. Mallory
Ah,
joined us.
hi.
Sorry, what were you? I missed the last thing that you said.
I know. I was just saying that there's so many different levels to setting boundaries. So, like we talked about in the very beginning, or even before this call, there's, the spiritual boundaries, the physical boundaries, relationship boundaries, and um, time, financial, there's just so many different boundaries that you can set. And I love how you talked about in your relationship how, you do need to set boundaries in your relationship too. And I think sometimes like the friction that comes with setting those boundaries of I need alone time
Mhm.
is like in getting to know oneself and being like, okay, now actually I need more alone time than I thought. But
Mhm.
then expressing that to the other person, like, is kind of, it can get kind of like eerie because, or you can get into a conflict because it's not what they were used to before.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, yeah, absolutely. So also communicating your boundaries is another topic in itself.
Well, yeah, and how exactly how we communicate it, because I really believe that we aren't very equipped to communicate effectively. It's not
Yeah.
something that we learn. We just learn whatever our family's method of communicating was, and some families yell, some families stonewall, some families, are
Yeah.
passive aggressive, right? Like there's sort of whatever recipe you ended up receiving for communicating, and it probably wasn't the most effective way. So there's a huge amount of learning that maybe that's just another conversation we can have. I think that is just like I said,
Communicating
it's
boundaries.
endless. Preston is saying, oh, he said a couple comments. Hold on, let me just go back. What does Preston have to say? He's talking about values. He is saying, yes, we need more shows. We started
Thank
out
you.
doing this girl talk. We were only going to do 4 episodes, but it's just there's so much. I mean, we're just going to keep going. We're going to have lots of different shows. And I think this topic of boundaries, actually, I'm curious, especially from the women that are watching, if anyone has anything that they want us to to discuss about boundaries right now, maybe anything that kind of this conversation brought up for them, any other aspects of boundaries that you would like to chat about right now, or potentially we could bring up in future episodes. Hi, Jolie. Just wait and see if anyone puts a comment in. You guys can also, I mean, I know this might be something that you want to ask us to talk about privately. You can also send us messages after the
Mhm.
show or anytime if you think about something that you'd like us to talk about on this weekly forum that we have here. I
Yeah.
don't think there's really any topic that's off limits. I think it's important that we really talk about all of these things and all of the ways that not just boundaries but other things that are affecting not be being discussed in an open forum. I think it's important
Yeah, absolutely.
to open that
Yeah.
up. So nobody has anything that they want. Oh, hold on, Nicole, thank you. Ooh, Nicole is asking a really, really great question about parenting. And her question is, what age is ideal to teach our kids about boundaries? I'd love to hear what you have to
Ooh,
say
that's a
about this,
great
Leah. So Leah
question.
and I both each have 2 kids, and we
Hmm.
also have been step parents. So
Nice.
we have some experience in this department.
Yes. At what age do you start teaching your children boundaries? I think it's from the very beginning,
Hmm.
really.
That's what I would
Like,
say. Age appropriately.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, just in the way that, let's say, I don't know, for a toddler, it would be different than, an 8-year-old.
Hmm.
Um, but just in the way that they relate to other people in the world. I mean, we do it naturally as
Hmm.
parents, where we're like, okay, just make sure that you don't like overstep that person's boundaries. Maybe not in those words, but there are many, many different ways that we teach it. In that just come naturally to us. But when it comes to, like, are you talking about specific boundaries, Nicole,
Yeah, I
or
guess
is
we
it
could
just
we
like in
clarify.
general?
Yeah. While we're waiting for her comment or her answer, I just like because I think one of the very basic and most important boundaries that we start teaching our children right away, we might not even realize it, is just saying no.
Hmm.
Saying no is something that many women have a hard time with. And I know that like I can be sometimes an overly permissive parent and I can have a hard time saying no.
Hmm.
Oh, okay. So Nicola's saying boundaries with friends. So do you mean like as they're getting older and as they're starting to relate to their friends kind of at that peer level, how they're going to impose their own boundaries? That's a really good question. So it's like as they're, starting to go out into the world, and how do they teach boundaries because of peer pressure, right? So Nicole has
Mhm.
two boys, 11 and 13. And yes, I mean they're right at that age where they're starting to exert their own independence. And
Yeah.
that can be, I have a 10-year-old and a 1-year-old, so I'm kind of right on the cusp of that happening. But yeah, and I think your kids are about that age too, Leah,
Yeah.
as
8 and
well.
10.
So, but
Mhm.
it's a great question. What do we do when they start to go out in the world, Leah?
I think, Nicole, like what's important is um, like you being true to your values and teaching them, that they need to be true to their values.
Hmm.
And I think in that way, it's much easier to set boundaries, especially when you're younger and you have peer pressure. Where if you know who you are and you know what you want, and you're not, you're not being fogged by other people's pressure.
Hmm.
And I think that's really important as a parent, just to like bring your kids back to what they value and what's important to them rather than what other people think is important to them.
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
how I see,
modeling that.
teaching. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's true because you're right. And, if we think back to what it was like when we were just kind of experiencing that and the peer pressure, I know for me,
Mhm.
it's sort of that fear of what other people are going to think or what other people are going to say. And so it's really strengthening and within ourselves and within our family unit and within our children, really helping to foster and develop a really strong sense of self
Mhm.
and just awareness that not everyone's going to agree always with what we believe to be the right thing to do, and we may sometimes feel like we're going against the grain, but it's okay. And so I
Mhm.
think, I mean, I know that the teenage years, there's a lot of confusion around that, and they'll learn one way or another. And I think that's the thing that's hard is sometimes there's an aspect of letting go on our side, but I think the most important thing as parents is giving that foundation, that really solid foundation, and then trusting that you've done your work, right? You've
Yeah.
done it. So Nicole also mentioned just boundaries with time. So again, going back to what you mentioned at the very beginning of this, with their time and health. So video games and exercising as well.
Yeah.
I think that's another interesting way. Again, maybe it is just mostly modeling it for ourselves and
Mhm.
showing them. Do you have any other input on that aspect, Leah?
So when it comes to time, Nicole, do you mean like just helping them set boundaries with, what's appropriate when it comes to like video games and that kind of thing? And if that's the case, then, well, I'm just going to speak from like my own experience as a parent, but my kids got really used to me creating lists and like, just creating a schedule for the day.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually sit down with them and I write on another piece of paper, what do you want to do today? What's important to you? And here's what the family is going to do today. And these
Mm-hmm.
are, and also, so I have like a couple papers. So what's important to the kids, what's important to me, and what's important to the family. So
Mm-hmm. I
these are
love that.
all the things I want to do today. These are all the things the kids want to do today. These are our family activities, maybe sports, that kind of thing. And then we set out the schedule together where we, address everyone's time wants. And let's say that, they always say play video games. Maybe they want to go swimming. They want to watch TV. Those are the things I get, right, on their list. And that's perfectly fine. That's kid stuff, right? And maybe play at a friend. So I see like where we can factor in all those things. And kids like to respect schedules. Like they do it at school if they're in school. They respect the schedule. So coming home, like I feel like they need some sort of scheduling, but there's also free play for them too, right? Within that schedule. So when they see me actually like carry it out with them, then it creates like a ritual, a routine for them, some sort of structure for them to like I've set my time boundaries, they've set their time boundaries, everyone's on the same page.
Mm.
And it just takes getting used to if you're not if it's not something that you do.
I love that. That's something that I would love to start doing in my family as well, because I think it's so beautiful, especially as you're looking at it as the family. Like, how do we want to be as
Mhm.
a family? And then everyone's individual needs are also looked at as well. I think it's hugely empowering for kids to be able to have that voice, but
Yeah.
also to have that structure. That's amazing. So I just wanted to let you know because Nicole's been commenting.
Mhm.
So she said yes. So you kind of took that and ran with it in the way that she was looking for information
Mhm.
on. And then I'm hoping that I can expand her comment. So
Mhm.
there's this weird thing with Facebook Live these days that if your comment is too
Mhm.
long, you can't read it all. So sorry, I'm just going to read the top part of your comment. And if there's anything more, Nicole, that you can add, just like
Yeah, we'll look at it.
one-liners. But it
Mhm.
says, she says, awesome. She wants them to feel empowered to set up their boundaries, but also within the structure of dot, dot, dot. So that's as much as I can see. But it sounds like, yes, we're all kind of agreeing that it's so important to have that balance of empowerment and structure. And I really think that that will allow our children to go out into the world and to really thrive in the world
Mhm.
because, to be able to be empowered, to be able to really understand that, getting clear on what our needs are. I really did not have an awareness of my own needs for such a long time. And
Yeah.
I floated and I floundered and without boundaries. I mean, I was a hot mess, right? So obviously, the fact that we're actually having these conversations about how we can help our children, you know, figure it out in a way that's really
Mhm.
healthy. So what Nicole was saying is she was talking about within the structure of her family. So we caught, yeah,
Mm.
that's perfect. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you for participating in this chat. I
Yeah.
think it's been amazing to have your input and your questions. It's really
Yeah,
helped
really
enhance
great
this.
question.
Yeah, this is just, and I didn't even think about that. We were talking about boundaries, and even though we're both moms, I didn't even think about boundaries as a mom, but how that affects, basically 100% of my day, right? We're always moms,
Mhm.
and we do need to have boundaries as moms, otherwise, we'll really lose it. So I'm so glad you brought that up. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, um, we have so many topics for our next Girl Talk.
Mm-hmm. Yep. We could
So,
almost, yeah,
yeah,
create a little calendar soon.
we
But
could,
anyway,
we could.
yeah.
Thank
What were
you
you
so
saying?
much to everyone who has been watching.
Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, Nicole. Nicole says she wished she could come on more often. I think that's what you meant. And she said she'll spread the word of all of our great work. That would be fabulous, Nicole. We
Thank
always
you.
we share like a little card. I don't know if you've seen it on my posts, but we share like a little. It's like our, I don't know what you want to call it. It's like a promotional card of the work that we do. You can also
Mhm.
share this video if you feel comfortable doing that. But anytime we do an announcement, we would love for you to share and just, invite more people on. I know that a lot of people are working during this time, but for them to catch the replay, for anyone that's catching the replay, you can always comment on this and we will read your comments and we will reply and we will always be creating more content and more topics based on what your questions are.
Mhm.
So thank you. I appreciate that, Nicole.
Absolutely. Yes, yes. If you like this content, like and share it and invite other people to watch this because we do it every single week and we take it to heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's part of our work in the world, really.
Yes.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess on that topic, like that's the other thing that we often will share at the end of these calls is if anyone's listening to this and they're wanting more support, they're wanting to deepen their work or get really strong in their own boundaries or in any aspect of our lives, that's part of the work. I mean, I think both of us, Leah and I, we both work in the world of really helping support, especially women in their own overall spiritual health and strength. And, we both do one on one work, and we have booking links that we'll share below where you can
Hmm.
book in to have a complimentary discussion with us on the work that we do, just to see, find out a little bit more if you're interested in, coaching from us. So that's available, and we will post that below as well.
Yes, absolutely. So we can't wait to see you on our next Girl Talk next week.
Yeah, we'll be back next Thursday around the same time. And I'm not sure we know our topic yet, but we'll share it soon. And we will see you there. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Lots of love.